Hi, I'm Scott Monroe, Food Safety Educator with Purdue University Extension, and this is another video in our series dealing with Food Safety Modernization Act produce rule and whether you as a produce grower may be covered by this rule. Recall that we've been working through a flowchart developed by FDA which helps growers to determine coverage under the rule. And today we're going to take a look at vegetable crops or produce crops that are intended for processing. Recall that fresh produce is fresh simply because we eat it without any processing or any cooking step. However, a lot of our produce crops are grown with the intention that they go through processing. And when FDA created the produce rule, they took this into consideration. Consequently, any produce that is grown for processing receives a qualified exemption. Now, what do we mean by that? Well, a processing crop is any crop that's grown with the intent of altering the fundamental makeup of the product or the commodity to create additional products. An example are these processing tomatoes. These processing tomatoes, whenever they turn red, will be taken and turned into ketchup, salsa, any number of products. Growers who produce processing crops receive a qualified exemption. What does that mean? That means that they are exempt provided they meet certain qualifiers. With regard to processing crops, there are two main tenets that must be adhered to. First, if a crop is grown for processing, the produce rule states that while that crop is in transport to the processor, there has to be documentation that states that the crop has not been grown or processed in such a way to significantly reduce the presence of microbes of public health significance. In practical terms, what does that mean? That means after we harvest our processing tomatoes, as we ship them to the processor or to the cannery, somewhere in our vehicle with our other shipping papers, we need paperwork that states that these tomatoes have not undergone processing, which reduces the level of microbes, potentially pathogenic microbes, within the crop. So that's our first step. En route to the processor, we need documentation. The second step is that our processor, on an annual basis, will need to give us documentation assuring us that once our crop was delivered, that it was treated in such a way that the level of microbes of public health significance was significantly reduced. What does that mean? In practical terms, it means that somewhere in that processing, there's a kill step. Whether that's cooking, pressurizing, or some other treatment or process. But again, we see two steps. Number one, the product is identified en route to the processor. And second, the processor gives assurances that the product was in fact processed properly when it was received. Again, growers will be expected to keep this documentation should there ever be any questions as to whether or not this qualified exemption is justified. In our next video, we're going to talk about other qualified exemptions that you may receive under the produce rule.